You start off doing everything and end up doing nothing. In my experience through our last exit, we built to 280 people. And by that point, I was doing very little, really. I was sitting on boards and making key decisions. That is about it. And that is, I think, ultimately a really positive sign, because you also give other people the opportunity and the ability to make change, all the things that they need for their careers. So yeah, very difficult process for some, but it is inevitable and necessary if you are ever going to really realise any value for it.
Let me invite you to sit back, drop your jaw, tongue, and shoulders, take a deep breath, and if you wish, close your eyes for a moment and feel the beat within. In a few seconds, you just jumped from your head to your heart and felt the beat within, opening up to receive even more value and fulfillment out of your business and life. And today's episode. I'm your host, Nico van der Venne, confidant to successful CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs striving to achieve everlasting fulfillment. Welcome to the Everlasting Fulfillment Podcast with our next guest, Simon Penson. Simon is a career digital entrepreneur, having built and sold a group of content affiliate sites, then setting up an agency group. That business started life as a performance and content marketing agency, and Simon spent 10 years as a thought leader and expert in the space. So many now look to his expertise in sales and marketing. Business eventually became a full-service digital agency. Alongside this, Simon started angel investing in 2016, realizing that the early stage world was in desperate need of not just cash, but people who had been there and who could help guide and support founders properly. Alongside that journey, he met 3 other angels with a similar worldview, and from that, Hatch was born. His consultancy company called Scaled has been his focus over the last 6 years, and he now spends his time helping and supporting B2B businesses grow fast and with less pain, and sits on a small handful of boards. Welcome, Simon. Now that's a major, interesting, lots of different kinds of all corners of the world introduction. Simon, tell us about your story, man. I'm really interested. I'm looking forward to what you're going to tell us.
Yeah, it's there's a bit to unpick there, isn't there? And it's definitely been a journey, not a straightforward one either. I think it's probably fair to say. But learned lots along the way, fall down many holes. The motivation now is to help others not fall down as many as I did in the shortest description where possible, really. But if I start at the beginning, though, I was lucky because I was born at the right time. You can't control that very easily.
True.
I was very lucky because I came to the working world just really mid to late 90s when the internet was becoming a thing. I couldn't have controlled that, so I was lucky to fall in at that point. But I was a journalist, actually. So a written word journalist working in print at the time. And that again was lucky because I think you very quickly realized in the late 90s that there was something really significant changing with the way that people consumed information. We were producing these quite incredible free products and they were going away. However good they were. And yeah, I also was fascinated with how things work. And so I started building my own sites and playing with very early stage internet, CMSs, that kind of stuff. And ended up building some awful looking sites, truly terrible now to look back at them. But interestingly, they started gaining audience. And so these terrible products that I was building digital were going that way. These brilliant products were going that way. And so that really acted, as I said, as that kind of budgie in the mine shaft moment. And so over the next, I don't know, this would have been sort of, by this point, 2000 to sort of 2008, that sort of played out, playing this dual role of corporate world, trying to help the kind of print publishing world become more digital, but also continue to be a magazine editor as I was at the time. And alongside that, these sites were growing, and eventually they got to a point where they built me enough runway to be able to leave the corporate world behind. So several of them failed. I made a mess particularly of one of them. So then my mistakes there of deleting sites and not having backups and those kind of things.
So yeah, a good idea.
Never done that.
That's learning the hard way. Exactly.
Really is after hours of content production. Another story for another day. But yeah, so they were very specialist niche content sites, basically, very specific markets. And a couple of them did really quite well. And they done me the wrong way. I left the corporate world behind. And eventually, actually, they were acquired. A couple of them were acquired. And by this point, it was sort of 2008 time, back in 2008. I thought, I've now got some money in my pocket and the opportunity to do something again. What should I do? Obviously, I'd learned all these skills from building audience over here and still put those to use by actually trying to teach other business owners that this thing called the internet actually had some value. Back then, it seems strange to say that, doesn't it, by 2008-9, but the internet still looked pretty different because the world of social media, for instance, was only just beginning. Facebook was still probably the dorm rooms only. So it looked really quite different. But we went out there and we started trying to sell into other businesses the importance of invest in digital and particularly in content within digital. Really hard sell. They had no idea what I was talking about. And that kind of continued for probably 3 or 4 years. So we had to, out of necessity, actually become a sales and marketing first organization. Rarely happens now, actually, because a lot of people start, particularly agency style businesses, with a black book of contacts and they go out to their network and they build from that. We didn't have that and nobody understood what we were talking about. And so we had to market ourselves and become thought leaders. And it was slow. We got to about 12 people by 2012, but thankfully, over that sort of process, we started to build a bit of brand. We created some network effect. We refined and defined our process and people really liked it. And slowly the hamster wheel started churning and the snowball started moving downhill. And we grew pretty quickly. And long story short, we were by this point a group and we were acquired in 2016 by Interpublic, which is a PLC kind of agency holdco group. And at the time, we were a decent sized business, probably 125 heads. And we took a deal that actually meant we had a longer earnout, which people thought we were absolutely crazy for doing. Most people run away from that. We ran it because we really invested in back office and senior team that would grow the business a lot further. We wanted to get benefit from that. And yeah, that is exactly what happened. We grew over that 3-year period. At the end of 2020, we more than tripled EBITDA. Trying to think, we almost quadrupled revenue. And it was really successful exit. And lots of people did really well, which is a great thing to me. Popped out the other end of that and hadn't asked enough questions of myself about what happens next, quite frankly, and went on that journey, personal journey a little bit. But thankfully, in the meantime, I had started angel investing, as you pointed out, here back in 2016. And by sort of 2018, I'd met 3 other people that kind of shared this worldview that actually angel investing at a very early stage, particularly at the time we were doing that into SaaS. Those founders were often first-time founders and really needed the help as much as they needed the money. They needed experience. And they were just being thrown. People were throwing money at them and then they were failing and people were wondering why they were failing. We wanted to change that. We started investing our own money and then we built a fund that exists and does very well today, investing kind of other people's money through EIS and SEIS in the UK, and is launching other funds now as well. There are over 100 investments in that business now, fantastic fund. And obviously I was able to, by the end I came out of 2020, was able to throw myself into that. And yeah, I think that did a couple of really important things for me, actually. I'm very happy that I'm pleased I had it, because otherwise my golf game would have got worse and my garden would have looked better. I'm sure either length good. But so I threw myself into this, helping other people. And it really validated the lessons that I'd learned through building our last business, because we just survived it, quite frankly, day by day. And because when you see it reflected through others and mirroring back, you're like, that's not the issue that you think it is, because actually if you do, this happens and that happened, and it becomes very validating. And I loved it. It didn't feel like work. It still doesn't feel like work. And that purpose box, I think, is a very important one to tick. When you've perhaps solved the financial questions, you still got to have purpose in life. And I really found it in doing it. And alongside that, as you can imagine, quite a few people from the agency world were asking me to help because of our journey. And I had no interest in the kind of consultancy piece necessarily. I loved the kind of help. And Scale really came out of that, really. So Scale is now a bit of a broader sort of B2B growth consultancy, but started off in the agency world, still has a lot of agency clients. And we're very careful with who we partner with because we want to make sure that there's a long-term fit. We're not set up for churn. We want to make sure that we can get people through to whatever success looks like, whether that's exit or building a kind of legacy business or whatever it is. Yeah. And I've loved that ever since and continue to learn stuff every day, work with smart people, really ambitious and focused and driven people. And yeah, it's great to do it. So that kind of brings us to present day.
That's quite a story there. There's a lot of ins and outs going around where you've done a lot of different things but what I do notice, and I don't know if you notice it yourself probably, but there's a lot of flow in what you're talking about. Things pop up, you act on them, and they become another form of success and just a kind of a flow. Is there a point where, if you're open to sharing this with us, but is there a point in the past where you were at your success point? Because I think you mentioned it when you stepped out at one point, when you got lost in that story?
Many. Yeah, there certainly have been. And I think obviously, when you play something back, it sounds like it's very strategic, doesn't it? But it wasn't. I think it was, like you say, it was very organic, actually. I think that one of the things that would be a strength is the fact that I can quickly see the inefficiencies in markets a little bit. And I can understand customer pain. I think between those two things, you can usually find opportunities to help people, and you can help people build a business. And I'm predominantly been building people-based businesses, and here's a new day. It doesn't matter if you're doing it for 100 years, you're still going to come across situations that you've never come across. And some people find that really difficult. I personally have to say that basically one of the joys really of waking up every morning is that the complexity and of dealing with people and people problems is really fascinating to me. Yeah, there have been almost too many occasions to count where it hasn't felt organic and it has felt really lumpy, and I've fallen down the hole and had no idea which way to turn and figured it out slowly. But the advice that an old mentor once gave to me always stuck with me, which was life is a bit like a hurdle race, or business is certainly a bit like a hurdle race, and the hurdles get bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. And so your job is just to keep jumping them. And a lot of people, for lots of reasons, and there's no right or wrong, decide not to jump the next hurdle because it's too high. And I've always taken the view that I want to find out what's on the other side. I'm accepting of the grazes on the knees as I fall over it. That makes sense.
Yeah. One of the statements that I've heard in the past is entrepreneurship is high-end sports. So it links to what you're saying, jumping over the hurdles. And I absolutely believe that as well. If I see how much time I spend in the office and thinking about the business and all different kind of angles, because like you said, it's not always it sounds like you're strategically looking at how you will tackle that next hurdle, or even that water pit that comes up sometimes as well. But it's funny how at some point I find it to be a little bit addicting. Sorry. At some point you're like, when's the next kick coming? Because I'm gonna jump, I'm gonna land, and I'm gonna feel that new kick come in after jumping the hurdle. And that's something that I've noticed in the last 4 years. I've been really actively building my business for 4 years now after Corona. And yeah, I understand what you mean. You do so many different things and something comes up and am I going to do something with this? Oh yeah, why not? You don't think about it too much and you just jump in, and then sometimes you're like, why in heaven's name did I even start this thing? But there's a lesson in there. And I think that's wonderful. It might sound difficult, but it's a lesson, and you pick it up and you push yourself through it. So you mentioned an old mentor. Is there some people in your life who actually stood by you and helped you along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've always been aware of my failings and weaknesses. And because of that, I've always had mentors. I had a couple through the agency journey, and I have no doubt that I would never have got as far as we did without that, because lived experience for me is the most valuable currency in the world certainly when it comes to business. You're not in reinventing the wheel. You can pretend that you are, but you're really not. It has been done before. And so many people miss that or don't like to ask or have egos that are too big to ask. And I've never been that. I'm like, I want to absorb it as quickly as possible, because in doing so, you hopefully don't trip up quite as much. Of course, sometimes, and interestingly, I see this a lot now through consulting and kind of network that I do, that you can take a horse to water, as they say, but you can't always make them drink. And you can tell them, this is what is going to happen. And if you do this, that'll how to avoid it by doing X. And people still sometimes need to go through that pain themselves and then come out the other side and go, yeah, do you know what? Actually, Simon, you were right, but needed to find out. That's probably part of human nature. But yeah, I think the biggest, outside of listening and really seeing the value in mentorship and advisory stuff, I think the other key component to all of this is just determination, willingness to sacrifice. And I do quite a lot of speaking at schools now, trying to help secondary students understand the world of work and what it really takes a little bit. And that's really the number one message there, is that you don't have to be the A grader. In fact, there is a lot of research to suggest that C graders end up employing graders, right?
Absolutely.
But what you do, I was a C grader, right? And but what you do have to have is determination and that kind of almost bordering on insanity ability to just keep moving forwards, despite whatever's thrown. That's it.
Very recognizable. A lot of people in my family call me one of the crazy ones, because it's funny that I think I had two uncles who were plumbers, and they had their own business, but nobody else in the family had their own business. They were all employees. And I've been an employee for, I think, about 20 years before I actually made the final jump to become an entrepreneur. And the difference between the two worlds are very clear, where on one side, you're following the troops, and on the other side, you're leading the troops without leading. That's what I enjoy about it. And like you said, the ones with the A's walking behind me now. Not all of them, of course, but most of them are. And one thing that I've noticed in that story is that there's a lot of people who have learned to push through because they've had to, where you end up or you start with at the bottom of the ladder and you have to get yourself to the next levels. You have to go through and you have to continuously prove yourself and do all these things and win from a lot of different angles as well, which teaches you to move forward and keep on moving forward. And like you said, the consistency every day, being there every day, standing there every day, even when you're sick and not okay, you're still there. And that's the key. And I've told so many people about this. It's not especially about it's good to know a lot of stuff. Absolutely. But you don't have to be a dumb person to start a business. But I sometimes compare it with getting kids, for instance. You don't need the user manual to make kids or have kids, but it would be very easy and a lot more help if you had a user manual. And I find that entrepreneurship is exactly the same. You're also creating a little baby and you're putting it into the world, and there are user manuals for it, but it doesn't say that you're actually reading them and using them.
Yeah, the reality to reality, isn't there? And I think on that kind of theme, I also remember that somebody saying to me when it came to decisions around exit, because you are building, particularly when it's your first business, it is like a child. And somebody explained to me that what happens during exit is that you go to sleep one night with the baby in the crib in the corner. You wake up the next morning and they're taking the baby, but the crib's full of money. And it's a joke in some respects, but actually the psychological kind of experience is very similar to that. You feel that kind of pang of guilt that you've decided that you're going to literally sell one of your children. And I think that entrepreneurs should prepare themselves for that going through the process of selling, because often you don't, because you're so transfixed with either running the business or selling, but not actually what it really means to you. So yeah, lots of lessons in there.
Yeah, it reminds me where I try to make the world aware of a couple of things. One of them is founderitis. I found this word at some point a couple of months back, and I was like, wow, this is smack on. And it actually defines where a founder becomes a micromanager is not open to change. It's a classic manager position, the one that's sitting on the cart, directing their people towards where they want to go. And it's all about their idea and so on. When you're at a point where you're saying, this little baby, at some point, I'm going to make it go away in some way, where somebody else buys it or you sell it or whatever. And you come to that point, I think you need to be able to detach from the micromanagement, from all the things that you think that are the right way to do it. Otherwise, that won't ever happen because you stay connected and ingrained in that one position. I've heard so many comments on, my company has my name on it. And they're saying, this is not a good strategy to later on sell your company. And actually, what I've seen here is that there's a couple of very big transport companies, logistical companies, who have the full family name still on them because the brand became very well known. So they still sold it. They have their name on it, but they're no longer the owner. So that's not the most important part. It's not what the name is. It's what its values are. It's contribution to the business, to the sector and so on. That gives it value. And that's what people buy. And if you're ingrained and a spider with your paws in everything, you're not going to be able to let go of that baby.
No. And it's one of the biggest challenges that I see on a day-to-day basis. The kind of growth consulting work, it's often earlier stage businesses are only the sum of their parts. And usually that really means the value of the founder because they haven't delegated enough. And that it's a process, but it's also a kind of psychological process, if that makes sense, because you've got to coach them around the fact that they are now the problem as much as they are the solution. We wouldn't have got off the ground if it wasn't for them to this point. But now it's not going to get any further unless they start taking themselves out of the process. And that is what building great, real, true value is, that you start up doing everything and end up doing nothing. And in my experience through our last exit, we built to 280 people. And by that point, I was doing very little, really. I was sitting on boards and making key decisions. That is about it. And that is, I think, ultimately a really positive sign because you also give other people the opportunity and the ability to make change, all the things that they need for their careers. So, yeah, very difficult process for some, but it is inevitable and necessary if you are ever going to really realize any value for it.
So for yourself, in that case, so you end up with the baby crib with a lot of money in it. Keep on that image. I like that image. Where you're sitting there in the crib with all that money and you've lost a baby, in essence. What happened at that point? What stuff goes through your mind, through your heart, because you're only human?
You know what? The thing that I always remember is the emails going quiet. I think that's one of the biggest shocks, actually, the day after. You're like, I don't have 100 emails sat in my inbox waiting for answers. I have not. And yeah, it's a very interesting kind of psychological process that I think all founders should prepare for. And so the answer to that is having the what's next question solved. And so I was, as I explained, lucky to have that. Yeah, it initially feels like a holiday, but with no email. But then quite quickly people tell me, say, I can't not do nothing forever, because obviously the person that you are is the reason it created, and that doesn't go away after an exit or any amount of money, quite frankly. That's why you see multi-billionaires continuing to work, because that is who they are. Doesn't necessarily bring happiness either. It obviously creates a bit of freedom of choice, but otherwise it's a bit of a responsibility, money, and that as much as it is a blessing. And yeah, my advice is to throw yourself in and try and find the thing that you really enjoy doing most as quickly as possible. Fill that void, because as I said, there's only so much golf you can play badly and gardening badly and holidays before you start questioning your reason to exist and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. So you were not the guy that was lying on the floor on the grass and seeing the grass grow and with the scissors right there, clipping off the one that's too large. You weren't there. Yeah, okay.
No, thankfully I saved myself way before that.
Yeah, I think you're actually really hitting the nail right there by saying that you should prepare yourself indeed with the next step. And I think that's what a lot of when they sell forget, that it's not only the money that's interesting, but it's what comes next. And I had a discussion last week with Liam Naden. I think he is a South from Australia, not Australia, it's New Zealand. Couldn't find. And he had an interesting story to tell where he actually at some point was a millionaire because he had several companies and he was very successful. He lost everything from really overnight. He lost everything and then started back from the couch. And he said the difference he made in life, because he's up there again now, he reached the top again, but he did a completely different approach where he said in the first part of his life, he went for the accolades, the financial success, the fame, let's say. And then when he realized that he lost everything, he was questioning himself, why does this happen to me? What do I do? And this and that. And he said at some point, he made a switch in his mind saying, whatever, I don't care anymore. I'll see what life brings. And he let everything go. And then he just started basing his life on all the opportunities that came in front of him. And he went into a certain flow and everything came to him and he started enjoying instead of reaching for it came to him. And that's something I was like, wow, this confirms something that I've been believing for quite a while and what I've been trying to make people aware of as well. Did that feel the same for you?
It did. Yeah, it really did. I think, in fact, what you can't quite read that's written behind me captures all of this quite succinctly. In fact, it's probably the best kind of capture of what it takes to build true value. Because I think that's the thing, is that people often also forget that they're obsessed with building a business, but they forget that you've got to build values for somebody somewhere or solve an inefficiency in a market for somehow and make things easier. Otherwise, there's no value. And that's it. What it really says in a nutshell is pick one thing, become the best in the world at it. And once you're the best in the world at it, then you can expand, widen the aperture of what you're doing. So then over time, some combination of network effects and all of those kind of things take effect and you build just invincibility. And then you've got something of value. That is absolutely the thing for me. I think I found the thing that I love. To do the thing that you're best in the world, become best in the world at doing one thing, you have to believe in it because it has to be very mission-led and it has to come from here and not here.
Yeah.
And no, because if it comes from here, people will buy it from you because it's real.
That's really nice to see. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's always been the case in the businesses that I've built, is that I truly believed in what we're trying to do and see that it's going to really help people. And if you take that view and you truly believe it, other people will believe it of you. And then your win conversion is better than average and your retention is better than average and you can sell them more things because you're believable and likable and all of those things. And you build the right culture in the business that you operate that also believes those things. Your why is very aligned across the organization, which is really important. And slowly you create that value almost as a byproduct, really, rather than a focus.
Yeah, I can feel that. I can understand what you mean. It's the most natural thing to do at some point. You're just doing it. There's no mind part. It's actually the way I started this podcast was exactly the same. I just said, what do I love doing? How do I need to? The first question was, how do I bring my face out there? Basically, because I never liked sales. I never liked marketing. I love talking to people. I love coaching people, but all that stuff that is important, absolutely. I would have loved to have one of those old plaque. It always reminds me of Scrooge somehow. Those old plaques saying financial advisor or coach or whatever on the side of the wall. And people would just walk into your office and say, I need your help. Those days have gone apparently. So we need to do it with these mediums. And I love it. Really. I started the podcast beginning of the year by just contacting one person and saying, hey, you know what? You want to do an interview? I'll do it in English because I want to go outside of my country. And he was like, oh yeah, this is fun. Let's try this. And now I think I've got 30 people I've already talked to in that time span. And it's so much fun. It's these conversations. I learn from you, you learn from me. That's the perfect balance, isn't it? And that's where your value comes automatically. And it's absolutely true. When it doesn't take any effort, it's fun. That's the thing, isn't it? It's finding the fun in the business.
And you need that to be able to create the longevity that you need in order to build the value. And I I think people underestimate, that's the saying, you underestimate what you can do in a month or a year, overestimate what you can do in a month and a year, but underestimate what you can do in 10 years. And so that's definitely been my experience for sure. Is that you think we're not making progress or we can get that done really quickly, and you probably can't. But then if you measure in much longer terms, the enterprise value that you're creating behind you is really significant. Yeah, it all comes back to doing stuff that you enjoy doing, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And every day is a new day, like you said before. And you never know what you're going to see that day. And it might be something absolutely great, or it might be absolutely shit. Yeah, okay, that's life. And that's one of the things that I've learned as well, is just push through. It might be hard, it might not be fun, but at some point you just push through. And on the other side, there's always the sun always shines after the rain. And it's so simple, but it's so true. And it also helps.
I remember one of my mentors had a particularly sunny disposition. You'll realize that he doesn't want to explain this. And he described life to me as a sea of shit punctuated by occasional islands of ecstasy.
Wow.
Most places. If you see it through that lens, then every day's a fun day, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. The only way is up. Cool. So what are the projects that you're working on right now that might be very interesting to talk about?
So I'm spending my time in two ways, really. One is through Scaled and really helping and supporting B2B businesses to grow. And that, as I said, that has massive variation and it's fun to do every day. And we've got a small team that I will now work with that really help and support that, particularly in the back office, because I just want to spend as much time as possible interfacing with kind of founders like this. And I'm also increasingly starting to work a bit with private equity as well, because right now they have lots of money in lots of dark places. They want to spend it. And so they're really leaning back into the market, and they're particularly interested in the B2B space at the moment. And so they come to people like me when they're looking at opportunity, but want to understand it more deeply. They're not operators, they're financial investors, and they're brilliant at that. And so I work alongside them in some of those deals. And now, over the next year or so, I would probably take one or two chair roles within those businesses, I think. Again, because I feel like I'm going to learn some stuff at that, because it's a bit later stage, like they're properly funded, it'd be a really fun journey. Between those two things, that's taking up most of my time now.
Sounds exciting. Yeah, some good stuff going on there. I really love what you're trying to bring into the world, where the founders that you're supporting in a way that your experience aids them in moving forward. That's a really great stuff going on there. There's a lot of people who need your services, I can imagine.
Yeah. As I said, I think you have to be a certain type of person because you have to understand the value of the experience. But for those that do, and the earlier they do it, there is undoubtedly a faster route to whatever success looks like. And that some people, they're hell-bent on exiting, and understandably, and all that kind of stuff. Other people want to build legacy, and they want to build a business that's going to go on forever, and their name is going to be above the door. And there's no right or wrong to that. And then there's obviously 1,000 shades in between. And I think the kind of experiences that I've had through exits and mergers and investments that I've done, because I've spent a lot of time in M&A now, the one area that I'm really intrigued about, and I think there is a huge amount of value in, but a lot of negative press for, is the private equity investment space, because lots of here of private equity, and I think there's all these kind of daggers and forest account ready to them in the back the moment they step a foot wrong. My experience has certainly been very different. I think that the industry has changed a lot in recent years, and what they can really do, which is really aligned to my mission, what I care about, is really accelerate that growth journey. They're very good at helping you run new business from a financial perspective. They can obviously allow you to take some risk off the table, which again, psychologically is really important, I think, people making key decisions. And of course, they can obviously help you acquire things along the way. And that kind of model is very interesting from my perspective. So yeah, really looking forward to leaning into that some more.
Cool. So talking about a lot of people probably needing your service, and you're probably going to be open to it. where can people find you? What do they need to do to contact you? Or is there any advice that you want to give them at this point?
Yeah, I spend all of my time chatting to people. We are a finite resource, ultimately scaled. I spend a lot of time chatting to people, and occasionally there is fit. So yeah, I would love to talk to people. It's what I spend my time doing. And as I've actually explained, so people can reach me either at simon@scaled.co.uk, or you can find me Simon Penson at LinkedIn. Please do, and honestly reach out, because I'm really happy to try and help answer any questions and share some war stories and all of those good things.
Yeah, those help, especially if you don't have to go through the war yourself. Kind of helps. Thank you very much for your time, Simon. I know that you're probably off to something somewhere. It's evening for you as well, so it's okay. But you're doing a lot of wonderful things, and I look forward to seeing you again at some point in the future. I do an exclusive get-together with all the guests from the podcast, so I will be inviting you to that as well. Meet some fun people there as well. Seen that already someone has a RSVP for September, so it's already filling up. So it's a lot of fun. We just had one last week, so I'll be joining you in there in the mailing list as well. And again, thank you very much for your insights and your experience that you brought to the table. And for the listeners, please feel free to contact Simon. I will leave his LinkedIn in the chat notes in any case, like I'd always do. And thank you very much, everybody, for listening. And remember to jump from head to heart. My goodness, I am mixing them up. From head to heart, and feel the beat within. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Everlasting Podcast. Let me leave you with a few questions to answer in the comments. How do you see the different topics we discussed during this interview? What are your thoughts? What stood out for you? Let us know in the comments, or just send us your feedback. We launch new episodes weekly. Don't miss any by ensuring you are subscribed to the show. Click the follow button now. We depend on the organic growth of the podcast to inspire more and more people. So by giving us a 5-star review and sharing this episode with at least one of your friends who might be interested in the subject, you will significantly help more people become inspired. But more than anything, I am grateful to you for taking the time to listen to the show. If you are also a successful CEO, founder, or entrepreneur who has inspiring words to say, feel free to contact us for an interview at contact@nicovandevenne.com. Thank you for listening. We will see you again soon with more inspirational conversations on achieving everlasting fulfillment.